It was good. We had a good time. A little too short, but it was well needed.
Regardless.
That's right.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
5:30, you get home.
It might be, I know you might have to be canceling.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming to this workshop. Could you stand for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There's a bunch of maps over there on the table if anybody needs a map of what we're talking about in the facility. And we're just going to ask for input from the public to what you think we should be doing. People that have spent a lot of time down there in their lives have got a pretty good idea of what we need and what we don't need in areas that need the most amount of attention. So we'd just like to let you all speak up, and Andrew, and we're going to be taking notes, and I'm not saying that we can answer questions about sizes and dollars and square footage and everything else, but this is the start of the process for us. So go ahead and start with your question. Andrew, would you give a little bit of a brief deal? We talked at the last meeting about locker rooms and
I'll give
bathrooms.
a brief discussion of what we've talked about so far and the conversation that we had at the previous board meeting. The map here that we've passed out today, we also had that at the board meeting. And this is really just a concept map that discusses different scopes of work for the project. Nothing very definitive. It's essentially kind of like a bubble diagram of work scopes. Starting with the exterior of the building needs to be upgraded and repaired. Specifically the roofing and siding. Parts of that are in rough shape. Some of the roof does it have some leaks in it, a few different leaks. So those will be addressed. For the inside of the existing building, we've discussed tearing all of the existing bleachers and locker rooms out, along with the concessions and bathrooms. We would go back with new telescopic bleachers that could be collapsed against the wall in order to provide more flexibility and function for that space. And we'd look to reconstruct new bathrooms in the corner where the concessions are. We'd also, throughout the existing building, replace mechanical, plumbing, and electrical fixtures and equipment where it makes sense. So we'll go in and review the existing infrastructure and replace what needs to be replaced as part of the project. The rest of the scope really lies within creating an addition to the north side of the building, opposite of the school, creating an addition to house new locker rooms, bathrooms, concessions, a new lobby and entry, as well as a new warming room off of the end of the building. So with that addition, we will reconfigure the entry from the existing corner off of Bolton Ave to more the middle of the parking lot. That's, for safety reasons more than anything, but also in that addition, that's where we'll have the new concessions and warming room and lobby. So it makes sense to come into that portion of the building there. And that's really it. There are other things we've discussed, but that's kind of a broad scope of the work that we've discussed so far. And we're interested in hearing more from the public about those scopes and really the issues, identifying issues with the current arena and propositions for how we can improve upon those issues. For each of the scopes, for each of the scopes I've discussed, it'd be good to get into some detail about what really, the occupants of the arena need, specifically, like for example, the locker rooms, having bathrooms and showers in those locker rooms, the number of locker rooms, how many locker rooms do we need, how many seats or spaces for for kids and adults do we need in those locker rooms? Things like that, so it's good to get into that level of detail at this meeting so that we can scope the project, you know, to create a successful project that'll work for the entire community, so.
One of the things I think that you told us, because we're talking about second story for viewing,
Mm-hmm.
is that we're definitely gonna stay away from that because that puts us into, is that the sprinkler category?
Yeah, so as soon as we go to a two-story, building with the addition, it becomes a code requirement to sprinkle the entire addition. Right now, we're looking, I believe at around a 6,000 square foot addition, and that could grow or shrink, that's a preliminary figure. But to sprinkle that size of a building, you know, is a large dollar figure. So that's a decision that we'll have to look at. I mean, it's not impossible to have a second floor on the addition for a viewing area. It just adds that level of, extra level of, fire protection and cost to the project. There is public water there, so there's, you know, good water pressure. In the addition, it's not such a big deal to put a sprinkler system in because it can be a wet system. It's a heated space. You know, the entire thing is conditioned. The arena itself, it's important to really avoid having to sprinkle that, mostly because of the size, and it becomes a dry system. With it being below 32 degrees, that has to be a dry system. Those are more expensive systems. As well as the size of the existing arena is over 20,000 square feet. So it's a factor almost 3 to 4 times larger than the addition. So that becomes a much bigger item to sprinkle the arena. The way around that, the way to avoid sprinkling the arena is to provide a firewall between the addition and the arena. So that's, you know, basically cement block construction or other types of firewall construction to create an actual fire separation between the two of them. And then the other thing we have to try to avoid is altering more than 50% of the area of that building. Once you break that 50% threshold, it essentially tells you, the code tells you you have to sprinkle the entire building. So those are two things you know, that's two things we've discussed. Certainly, you know, it's not impossible to do either, but it adds cost to the project and complexity.
So we'd like to hear what anybody's got to say, or
Andrew,
thoughts?
that second story on the, warming room, if that were just storage, does that same rule apply?
No, it's only as if it's based on occupancy, and I don't want to say no for sure because we'd have to check it for other occupancies.
Yeah.
But if you put the A4 arena occupancy, you know, viewing
Right.
on a second floor, that's what would require it. So we'd have to look into it. If we had something else up there, it may not require.
So I'm just, saying because the figure skating club is gonna lose their storage for all their equipment up there, is that something you think we could, would you guys want that?
We want storage.
Do you want storage?
We have
I mean, we're eliminating that with taking out the bleachers and taking out those.
Yes, all the rooms above there will be
Yeah,
removed.
so instead of, you know, utilizing some of these storage rooms over here, we may possibly leave as a locker room too, right? There's 2 existing ones there right now.
Yes. Well, that's a discussion about those existing, there's 2 small ones and then the one large one in the corner. What we do with those. Does it make sense for them to stay locker rooms, or to convert them to storage rooms?
There's some, state sport requirements for locker rooms with figure skating.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have, like, there has to be, a ready room for, like, younger children. And then there has to be a locker room for older children under 11, whose parents can help them get changed.
So I guess that's what I referred to on the 2.
Yeah, and then you need another locker room for kids over 12 and over, I think, who then need to get changed by themselves.
Okay.
So I think that ends up with, we usually have 3 different locker rooms based on, like, safe sport requirements. I don't know what it is for hockey.
Still get dry.
There is.
Are those locker rooms in a good location are they a better location for storage, or are they best kept for, locker rooms? Because they do come out right into the arena.
Okay.
You know, the new locker rooms will open up onto a hallway that then connects to the benches. So there's a convenience to the locker rooms being in the addition and putting storage out in those other spaces. Mostly because to have all the locker rooms connected, you know, I think seems to make sense functionally. And that's why we just had indicated that those would become essentially storage, you know, and those locker rooms, especially the two smaller ones on the end there, they could easily be converted to storage rooms, without really much work. If it works for storage, if those
I don't
types of
think the
spaces.
location of different locker rooms really matters as long as there's some separate spaces
Okay.
to be able to follow those requirements.
So you mentioned 3 locker rooms minimum, and I think hockey will probably say at least 4 because of the rollover with teams. I think 4 is a minimum.
We also talked about the varsity having their own locker room, right? That would be the varsity girls and boys.
A dedicated locker room.
Also, that locker room at the end, that's the varsity boys now. Ideally, if we could put the turf in there to store that, and have a overhead door there, that would save a lot of hassle and contact boxes.
Do you know how much space the turf requires for area?
Well, they basically all fit in a Conex box.
Okay.
And that was 40 feet. Do you remember the dimensions, around 10, 12 wide or 10?
Yes.
10 by 10 by 40.
I think so.
What's that, how many?
10 by 10 by 40.
So that room should be plenty big enough
I
then.
don't know how deep that is, but if you did it right, you could stack them with actual, like tiers there.
Other things to consider in the locker rooms would be like, an officials room. We need something like that when it comes time for hockey as well.
Size of those containers.
But I mean, that could bleed over into another,
Legal.
I think they already have a small one, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Yeah, or if something like that
Yep,
stayed into
eight and a
existence.
half by 10 by 40.
So in that little hallway right there, there's a officials room.
Yeah, but I mean, I didn't know if that was gonna affect like the storage, if you were gonna put storage on one end, locker room on another, I would say you could almost have every locker room on that one side. I mean, I know instead of in Watertown, it's all like that, there's, I believe, 6, locker rooms on that side, one of them's used as an officials room. In that hallway, considerably larger hallway, I mean, they include the storage, they have a storage area for figure skating, there's one for minor hockey, things like that.
Now with the turf, is that like long, like something that you could put into some kind of like a cylindrical tube and suspend from the ceiling? Like put it
We
in
talked
there
about,
and
like,
have it
really
go up high, or how is that
shelving, right?
made?
Yeah.
So you could like,
So, if you go into like Sam's Club, they have the super heavy duty, storage shelving. We talked about something like that because I think it's like 1,400 pounds a roll.
is that something like you roll up, you could stick it in a tube and then it could go up and be, instead of being like on the ground or in
Yeah.
whatever, you can hang it up,
So there's a tube,
suspend it.
yeah, there's a tube that goes through the middle, like a PVC tube, that
Yeah.
they stick the fork through, so they can put it wherever they want. Just getting to it and having that height, I mean, then you'd have to open up the building, you don't have that height on that wall, it comes this way.
No, that's a
So we're
lower
not
roof out
bringing
there.
anything up, I missed the beginning, so we're not gonna raise the ceiling or anything with the addition?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not the existing building.
So that wouldn't work to be able to bring it up or else like attach it to, like in the winter time or whatever,
Yeah.
attach it to some kind of a wall along the side
So
or
that
something.
eve, that comes down this way, right, and that's probably maybe a 10-foot wall or something, 12-foot.
Yeah, on the back of the storage room.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd certainly look at the size of the rolls and how they're stored, and then come up with a storage solution for them. Because it has to work with the building, it's a function
Yeah,
of the storage space,
yeah, no question.
so.
So get those metal containers out of our backyard.
I don't know how it fits in yet and how we'll store them, but we will have a solution.
There's
My
also,
question
if
is,
you look
what
at
are we
that-
talking about for, how many bathrooms are we talking about and where?
Well, the locker rooms, we've discussed bathrooms in and next to the locker rooms. Certainly you have to have them at least near them. It sounds like we're talking about probably 5 locker rooms, 4, flexible locker rooms, and then 1 dedicated varsity locker room. So if we have 5, do they all need bathrooms and showers within them?
Could you do it like how Bonnie had it, how they all dumped into one?
Shared showers?
Yeah.
You can do that. You don't have to have the bathrooms either within them, they can be out in the hall. They are gonna all, the vision is that there's a hallway that they all open into before you actually get into the arena itself. So you can have the bathrooms off of that hall, they don't have to be,
Bathrooms will be against the outside wall.
what's that?
The bathrooms will be against the outside wall of the addition.
Inside the hallway somewhere, there probably will be pocketed in between locker rooms and things.
Yeah, between locker rooms.
So it's mostly because if they're in the hallway, then anybody can use them. They're much more flexible than if they're in the dedicated locker rooms. The showers need to be in the locker rooms. You need to have access to those. But the bathrooms themselves, you could put out in the hall.
Are we gonna be able to have elevated areas above the area for the announcers and the systems and all that?
Yes,
Kinda where they are now?
that was discussed as well, with the announcer's booth. That's gonna come out from where it is now because of the bleacher system, that'll take up that space. So we've talked about different locations for putting that booth. It has to be elevated, preferably it's in the middle of the rink, so that, it's in the middle of the ice. We talked about going over top of the, essentially be the penalty box, building out over top of that, and then accessing it from a small stair, from the addition to get up into that space. I think that would be the preferred option, to put it on that side so it doesn't impact the bleacher system. If we do keep it on the side where the bleachers are now, we would have to, make the viewing bleachers smaller and adjust the bleachers for it. It could also go to one of the corners or the end of the building, but I think that it really doesn't function as well in those areas.
They have it over on that side in Ogdensburg, they have it above, raised, it's ground level in the burn, but it's raised and flat, sky foot,
Mm-hmm.
And just
mostly where they are.
when the locker rooms are finished or complete on that side, as far as the ceiling goes, are we going floor to ceiling with that locker room, or is there gonna be like a mezzanine on top of that, or?
Well, we don't know yet. More than likely, based on the eave height of the existing rink, there wouldn't be much room for a mezzanine. So more than likely, it would just be an open ceiling space up to the roof structure.
I was just thinking between storage and, you go to like somewhere like Syracuse, you get up into the rafters, you know what I mean? And all the operations are done, like basically at a site.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying it's ideal for the situation, but there's possibility without having, a wasted space kind of feature. You're gonna have options for storage up there as well. Minimal, it sounds like, but it's space is space at this point in time. There's not a lot of it available over there, so.
Right.
And, and this was my question, it was kinda earlier, you know, we were talking about, you know, if you go up and then occupy, you'd have to sprinkler it, I don't know if I said that right, but, you know, if we did go up, you open up options, you know, for this, also standing seating. You know, I understand there's a concern for freezing, you know, that's something you wanna monitor, but I mean, to keep a hockey rink at, you know, 50 degrees isn't out of the norm these days. I mean, it's very doable, and it would sustain, you know, water for that purpose. If we raised the roof, if you will, it gives you more options for amenities, building functions, you know, sound, places to hide things, you know, things like that. My biggest concern when I mentioned this workshop was that I don't wanna put lipstick on a pig kind of thing, just to appease everybody. If we're gonna do this, I feel like we should really do this correctly, and not limit ourselves, but leave us room to grow even after this. There's gonna be a next set that comes in with a different vision, you know, where do you wanna go from there?
Question, somebody, a spectator or somebody just in the arena, where are the bathrooms gonna be that they're gonna go to? They're gonna be tied into the ones on the other side at the locker room end?
Well, there's probably gonna be multiple bathrooms for the public. You'll still have the ones here at the end that'll, you know, we'll maybe renovate those in place. We're gonna go back likely in the corner where the concessions are.
Yeah.
With a set of bathrooms, those will be probably the largest bathrooms
The
in
main
the
set.
facility. Yeah, the main set there, just because it's directly adjacent to most of the seating. And then we're also gonna have some bathrooms in near the lobby.
Near the entrance.
Yeah, near the entrance. So you have those, for really the warming room, you know, and you base the size of them based on the seating of each area and the number of occupants.
Yeah.
So those will be a little bit smaller than the ones in the rink, and then we still have those. I think it makes sense to keep those, or keep a bathroom down there at the end.
Yeah.
So you have 3 sets of bathrooms, for the public, and then for the players, you have the ones inside the locker room wing. So that's one of the really bigger amenity upgrades to the, you know, the bathrooms now are in really, really tough shape, so.
They really gotta be gutted and start from scratch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's not much really we can save with those.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the things, I mean, obviously, anything we do there is a great improvement of what we have, and it's definitely needed. The rink is primarily used for hockey and figure skating and the kids at the school. And I know this is gonna be a costly project and it's gonna be a burden on the taxpayers. How are we paying for it? Are we gonna get grants, or how much do you think we're going to be able to get for help to build this or do the project? How are we gonna pay for it?
How are we gonna pay for it? Are we gonna get grants?
I mean, we've talked with Andrew about this a little bit, and we have another person that we're gonna talk to, that's a grant writer, so we're definitely gonna be applying for grants. Obviously, the town could have some of our own money that we put into it, we could look into bonding for it. Currently, we had an $800,000 bond on the floor. We owe $290,000 on the floor. That's where we stand, that's all we owe on that facility.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because obviously it's gonna be a burden on the taxpayers, and it's for teaching our kids how to play hockey and figure skate and other things. And we do that now at the school with all other sports. And I'm wondering if we should do, an analysis of the cost-benefit analysis of having the school take over the costs of this rink and utilizing it for other purposes besides just hockey. Lacrosse, weightlifting, there could be a lot of things that may be an advantage to the school to have that. It's a question of who pays for it, to educate our kids over there what we're doing. Is it best the school does it, or we can get state aid? I know we can get the state to pitch in based on our tax levy, tax rates, right, or whatever it is. I know Tupper Lake is one that did it, and they got a 90%. We're not that high, I understand, but there's places that have done this where the towns given it to the school. School has taken it over, and it's been a benefit to their community, and they run it that way. So I think it'd be a very, a good thing to do an analysis, a very good analysis of what are the pros and cons of the school taking it over and running it as part of their program for kids with sports, which is, you know, should the town provide it for the kids, or should our school provide it for its kids? And are those options that may be more beneficial to one way or the other to doing that? But there needs to be, I think, a really good analysis of that, which is best for our community, not only from a taxpayer standpoint, but from what the services it can provide for our kids, being in the hands of a school which is set up to teach kids, and get them over there for gym classes and other ways to utilize that facility. And if they own the property, probably some of the parking and access through that road could be stopped, so it'd be safer, so people could cross the road. I don't know, but you could maybe just take that area where there's a place that parks, they have to go around. I just throwing these things out there as ways to make it part of our school, where, you know, it's getting run by the school for their educational purposes, and they're brought up at a young age to make that part of their gym. I know they do that, but it's just, if you're in control of it, it's just easier to do. And what is the benefits to the school kids by doing it this way, with other things that could be added into the design that makes sense for the school? What do they need now that they don't have? Or do they need areas for spring training, fall training, summer sports in there? Maybe it's set up. The school would have complete control over it then, and it wouldn't have to be on a, you know, ask basis. And what is the benefit to the taxpayer if we go this direction or this direction? I just think we need to do our due diligence and find out what is best for our community and what is the best thing for our dollar and for our kids to make the best situation for everyone.
I think that when you look at the four major players that are using the rink, you're looking at the figure skating club, which is private, and you're looking at hockey, which is private. You're looking at the town of Alexandria using the turf for sports. And then in the absence of the school having the gym, with the gym being under construction, they've been using it more. But I anticipate that when the gym comes back into full function, that's not gonna be, you know, something that they're gonna be looking at using as much, and that's gonna put it back on the town of Alexandria using it for our youth sports and the two clubs. I think that if the school had ownership of it, that might make it a little tricky with two clubs using it, weekends, evenings, and things like that. That might make it a little tricky.
Well, one thing is, I really don't wanna see it called an ice arena. It's a multi-use sports complex, right? Because with that turf in there, the costs, you know, the benefit from, you know, the income from it really offset cost this past year. So that's a huge thing for the town to gain revenue there, right? I mean, you can attest to that, right?
Isn't there a lot of rules and regulations that the school has to follow that the town of Alexandria doesn't? And I don't wanna be, but I mean, we have the men's hockey league, and there's certain things that kind of go on that where there's zero tolerance policies, there's nothing like that would be allowed to happen if it's a school-owned facility. And there's all different kinds of activities that the town could actually hold there and do that they would not be allowed to do in different organizations, that you'd have to follow different guidelines if the school owned it, and that would put limit a lot of things that could be done and used.
I think the business case analysis, though, showing all the pros and the cons, and seeing if there is maybe a joint venture to offset the cost, to your point, to where the school could be in a better position, or the district could be in a better position to offset some of those costs, the bonding or the state funding, should be explored. The kicker is, and I don't want to speak for Chris, is, you know, the school gym project that we have in hand now, and then the amount of time that it takes to do that business case analysis, showing the pros and the cons, and then as you get buy-in for that, that all kind of pushes stuff to the right. And then I know, you know, as far as the timeline with the gym, and our use of it too, that's critical too for our fall sports, next year too, so, and spring. So, I think it's the right thing to do in the long term, to make not, and I'm not saying this, don't take the wrong way, an assertive conclusion. I think we need to do our due diligence. We need to do what's in the best for the community to save money and do it right the first time, because I'd hate to say, hey, we're rolling out and not putting a lipstick on a pig, but if we make it better than what we found it, and we missed an opportunity, a great opportunity to save, get to a win-win situation, I think we would all regret the fact. So I think sometimes, you know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. But I don't know what that looks like, the legwork on the legalese, the business case analysis, and then.
You've got Tupper Lake School District that did it, and I know there's other ones probably in the state too. And I think that's where you start. What have you done, and what did you do to do this, and how has it been, and how's it working out for you? And they've already done all the hard work. They've already done the legwork. They know how it works. You probably get a lot of answers there very quickly if you talk to the right people there. So I know all those things. And then you can do the analysis if you.
Were you involved in the group years ago that with the village and people went to the school and the school looked into turning it into a teaching station, and they looked into the rules and the regulations that go along with that whole process?
Mm-hmm.
And that was at least 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm sure things have changed, and I'm sure I agree with the due diligence and, you know, to do it and do it right, it'd be pretty, you know, thorough process, no question.
Well, the rink's been like it is for how many years? It takes us an extra year to do it, and do it right. Let's look into it. I don't know how long it would take, but I think we should at least start the process and see what, if Tupper's is a big problem, you'll know right away. I think that's probably where you start. How did you guys do it? What were your hang-ups? What did you have to get through? And is it working for you? And how do you bring in the other clubs that want to use it? And how do you, those are things we don't have to answer. It's already answered somewhere.
Yeah.
Chris, do you have it immediately?
Yeah, there's, so I did reach out to State Ed initially, just to see what their answer was if this scenario were to happen. And I'm sure Andrew knows this better than all of us. When State Ed looks at a facility, they divide it, they allow a certain number of building units. So based on your population, you're able to have X number of building units that will be state aidable. In the gym project, this gym is bigger than the last gym, so we ran into trouble even getting enough allowable state aidable building units for the current gym. They had said they will not allow another facility to be aidable with the current student population. So, to me, it was pretty clear that if the school took over the rink, if we were to do a project, there's no benefit in terms of having the state pay a portion or predetermined portion of that. It would be on taxpayers entirely. Now, I don't know how that would translate to maintenance of a facility. That was the nature of the conversation that I had. It was about new construction, about renovating an existing rink.
Chris, would that apply to leasing as well?
Say again?
So if the school were to lease from the town,
That I don't know. I can't imagine they would allow us building units for a leased building.
Right. You'd have to show need and.
Right.
Is that something, that issue that could be a killer on this idea? Is that something you would get politicians involved and say, listen, you know, there's always rules that can be bent. This rink's been here for all these years. This is our school. We don't have a swimming pool. This is what we do. We play hockey here, and we need it in our school. There may be ways to get around that, that we should explore. Obviously, there's always a couple of ways to get around things. If you look hard enough, then you want to do it.
Anybody else have any input or questions?
Do you remember what year it was when we sat in on a committee to renovate the rink the first time? And we talked about, George, we talked about going a second story. And Andrew, I think you have some information on that too. Was that like 5 years ago?
How long ago did we look at the last renovation? 5, 6 years ago?
I saw some of those things 2008, 2009.
Okay, I'm way off.
I saw it, you said, plus some of the stuff that Rick tags on.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we had
You remember what, cause you did a bunch of legwork too, on it too.
2009 was, I think, the last year.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, even if you took the height that we could get without making it, accessible area, I mean, that changes the dynamic of the building itself as well. I mean, you're giving yourself more area to work with, even below. I mean, just speaking from the box lacrosse that I've watched lately, they can't do a clear out pass because it goes right across the ceiling, you know what I mean? So, really, that changes the game for them, you know, there's gonna be no goalies scoring in lacrosse down there, it ain't gonna happen. But if there was another 10, 15 feet up there, you got a chance, you know? And I'm not talking we have to go 25, 30 feet in the air with this thing, but I mean, let's be honest, we can't go left or right. We're stuck in the footprint that we have. Where we're going is gonna be our limits. So the only other way to go, would be up, you know what I mean? There's bowl arenas, there's, you know, things like that gives you seating. I mean, there's gotta be a way to make this work without sacrificing top end somewhere. I mean, that'd be my only concern.
Is that something that could be played in our new gym?
Box lacrosse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would require the turf, and then, I mean, you got the school, and, again, yeah, I mean, it's,
Okay.
yeah, I personally wouldn't wanna see it in there myself, because, you're taking an adult entertainment and throwing it in the school, and again, you'd have all the red tape, you know, you'd be limiting yourself there.
What would those balls do to our newly renovated arena?
I mean, really, you're talking the playing surface itself.
It's the same thing as a pocket, except for the pocket is.
So it's gonna have boards?
Yeah, the arena,
Okay.
the boards don't come down, and they play same style,
Gotcha.
really. I'm going there after if you wanna check it out. They're playing at 8 o'clock, so.
I apologize, I was late, I had a prior obligation. So I remember that the last time we were here at the town meeting, there was some discussion of only being able to go so high because then you were getting over a certain percentage of renovation where you had to bring certain things up to a certain level, and so that automatically brought you into an exponential cost. So is there any information on, can you raise the roof without bringing in that exponential cost in a renovation where you're, so that's my concern, because once you bring in that exponential cost, then that's where I just see the most concern in terms of a renovation. Not that I don't want a nice rink, but I don't want to have to get to that next, I'm assuming that the board here doesn't want to get to that next level, where you're having to put in a complete fire safety system, put in a number of things. Not that that's not nice and we shouldn't be proactive about that, but the amount of expense then makes that renovation that we're looking for have to be turned back. Because there's only gonna be X amount of money to move forward. So how much, I just don't remember, how much renovation can be done to keep, you said there was a certain percentage, what was that?
50%.
50%.
Of the existing arena.
So when we add the locker rooms in, that we're looking at right now, what's that percent?
The addition doesn't count towards it because it's separated with a firewall.
Because that's separated with a firewall. So that doesn't count, and so it's the renovations inside. So the renovations that are here that don't include the roof or anything like that, what percentage of change is that?
Well, the roof exterior repairs don't count either. It's really work inside the building. The goal really is if we don't touch the recreational surface, we'll stay under the area. So, as long as we're not renovating that space, we'll stay under that 50%. So it's considered level 2 alterations.
Yeah.
And so really, we have a lot of flexibility then because of that with renovating the inside.
So raising the roof is a possibility in terms of that, but getting into a second story in terms of a warming room brings us past that, doesn't it? from our
Yeah,
conversations
and
last time?
the second floor warming room is a whole separate thing, that triggers a sprinkler system.
Okay,
Raising the roof on the existing building is, I mean, the existing,
I don't think you could do that. It's a Butler building designed to be what it is.
we could, but it would be
Yeah,
a very, very costly
Yeah.
upgrade. Because we'd have to unbolt the structural steel frames, and essentially, we couldn't extend them, we'd actually have to bring the foundation up with new piers to support it higher.
Yep.
So technically feasible, but extremely, extremely costly.
It'd be, you probably could build a new building cheaper.
Well, you'd start to have to analyze that.
Yeah.
You may actually just tear it down, keep the ice surface, and build a new building around the ice there.
That would probably be,
Because at that point, all you're really saving is the steel frames plus the girts. And it's a lot of work to go through just to raise those up.
Yep.
But it is something, I mean, I think the biggest challenge with that arena is the height of the steel frames. If there's any drawback, it's that. It doesn't impact hockey so much per se, or figure skating. It really hasn't ever, I mean, the puck has gone up and hit the ceiling, but, you know, you stop play. And for seating, you know, it's not really going to impact the telescopic bleachers in any way. It's just really, when you're in there, it's just, you know, the ceiling is a little bit lower than maybe other arenas, you know, throughout the North Country. So it's something, you know, we can certainly discuss it, but it's probably, that's a really big ticket item to raise the roof of the existing building.
so I'm just realistically in my head trying to see, I'm assuming the board wants to keep it within a certain scope and a certain scope financially. And I'm just trying to see realistically what we can get done that is gonna, you know, not feel like putting, with the expression, lipstick on a pig, you know, that makes it, but I think understanding that some of the things that we would all want, like it would be lovely to have, you know, a second story viewing room and a second story this, but then we're essentially talking about a new rink. Like, even if it's the place that's there, that's what we're talking about, and that's, you know, a whole different ball of wax, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm just realistically trying to understand what we can do within the scope of what you talked about last time, and not triggering something. It doesn't seem like the town wants to trigger something beyond a certain level.
See, when he's able to put information together for us and prices and numbers together, one of the things that we've talked about is pricing on different aspects of it.
Okay.
To have a breakdown. It's similar to what you do when you go out in a bid process. You might put 5, 6 different parts of your project, it's with separate numbers, so that you can say, we don't wanna do this, but we wanna do this, and we wanna do this. So I think that's probably how we're gonna design this, right?
Yeah, it's gonna be almost like an a la carte menu, so to speak,
Yeah.
with a price tag associated with each scope. So that we can use that to really, you know, identify the budget for the project. And I mean, certain things, honestly, like raising the roof, we could probably put a budget on that, but it's gonna be the biggest budget in the project to do that.
Yeah.
So it's something we'll look at for sure.
And then, you know, just having chaperoned hockey games and stuff, and as I mentioned last time, you know, it's speaking outside of figure skating, it's having a locker room big enough for a hockey team, because right now there's really just one locker room that's kind of big enough for a hockey team, and that's what the home team uses, but the outside teams at this point don't have a locker room that's large enough for them. And, you know, so that's a big complaint you hear from, you know, when other schools come, and that's why other schools also would prefer not to play at our home rink as well, because it's not a facility that's really useful. The team ends up getting split up. So I don't know what those locker rooms look like, you know, or even if minor hockey wants to have a tournament, even when we do have some home tournaments there, you want to make sure that a whole team can fit in a locker room. I don't know what those 4-team tournaments look like, but they can't possibly fit anywhere. I mean, they must be, you know, so I don't know what the size of those, like, 'cause I can't see the size of the locker rooms, but what that looks like, you know, making sure that you can have 4 teams that can have locker rooms.
We'll take, like, a varsity squad probably has the most, requirement for a locker room size, and we'll certainly ensure that the locker room sizes can handle a varsity level squad.
You've never seen 10 girls with their figure skating dresses all the time.
You know, how much length of bench does each, child need? That's
Hair,
what we have.
makeup, noodles,
Hair,
6 outfits.
24 kids in a locker room with kids.
Yeah.
And I mean, you gotta figure these kids aren't sitting down half the time either, so.
Right.
Things get pretty busy, you know.
That's the other thing I was looking at, Andrew, could we bump the addition down
It can.
to the storage room to give us more room for the locker rooms and bathrooms possibly?
Yep, we can expand all the way down to the corner.
With the addition of the turf, how do we best future-proof this building to say, yeah, we use it mostly as an ice rink right now, but we also have other uses that we anticipate 15 years from now? Based on other facilities, what are rinks our size or close to it doing when they have turf?
When they do not have turf.
When they do have turf, like what can we anticipate in the next 10 years?
We're pretty unique. I think we're jumping on board with this early. We have something that's kind of like a first in the area. Because if you look around, you tell me another rink that has it right now. And I think the next closest would be, I don't know if Clarkson, they had the old rink down below that they turned into turf. So they're kind of the first ones that did that, but they did not use their ice surface there anymore. So it became so popular with all the other sports. But as far as other places that do this, I think we're pretty unique.
I don't think there's really another area that does a twice-a-year turnover. Like Ultimate Goal's got the permanent turf year-round for their facility. Like you said, the annex up there is dedicated to turf. There is nothing, I don't think, with really a changeover that I could think of.
And is there a blind spot where it's hard, and there is, how do we do the best we can to make sure that 10 years from now, we anticipate what this rink will be and how we're gonna use it? I don't know how we can do that, but are the facilities we're building, the rooms we're building, the locker rooms we're putting in, and everything we're doing, is that future-proofing it, or is it not?
I think regardless of what happens down the road, you still have a new facility that can house either. So, I mean, to be completely honest with you, if the town wanted to make more money, the turf stays on year round, and they would actually make money at that facility, then I would go on record by saying that. But ultimately, you're providing a service to the town, the residents, right? So whether it's hockey or figure skating or public skating or whatever it is, that's where the multi-use thing comes in. So we're unique in having that. I mean, it's very unique.
Chris, you said that the state aid was limited because the size of the population and the number of buildings you have?
The state awards a number of building units based on your population. So each building unit is a certain size. So when we redid the gym, we didn't have enough building units to support the size of the gym we wanted to put in because the population decreased. So we had to fight tooth and nail just to get enough building units for what we're putting in right now. And they did award that. But they had said this is unique, we typically don't do this.
Building units as far as classrooms, you mean?
I'm not certain how to define a building unit, it's just how large your building is based on your population. So they had said that this is a one-time gift for a gym because our current gym was so small. But they had indicated, when I called them again, that they would not award us more building units based on the population. And a building unit is just, it's a reimbursable unit, so they're saying for anything that happens within those admissible building units, we will get state aid on those units if we renovate, if we, whatever we happen to do in those areas, we can claim state aid on those units. So that means we wouldn't get building units on the rink if we were to take on the rink.
What is our taxable, or what do we get reimbursed from the state on this?
About 54% on building aid.
Building aid, okay. So, I'm in the construction. I always get asked, is it better to renovate or tear down and start over? obviously, you got a rink here that you're gonna put a lot of money into. Obviously, it's not gonna be as much as putting a brand new rink on. Now, if there's a way around this, which I always say there's a way, if there's a will. What if we take that rink and bulldoze it and add it onto the gym, right to the school, and have parking across the street? Look at a brand new rink that's gonna be subsidized 54%. And then you can spend double the money and not be in any worse shape, and it's connected where these kids are. And it might be something.
That's not possible, that's what he's saying, like, it's
No, I
already.
understand there's limits to what you can do, whether it's across the street or not. But if we're gonna go down the road and see if there's some way to get around this thing, and there's always a possibility, just, you know, I'm not gonna say for sure, you always got, if you really wanna do something, you just try. And does it make sense to look into the possibility of making that rink a parking area or something else, and hooking a rink, a brand new rink, without these issues with roofs and all this, and do it the way we really want it for the next 4 generations, and hooking it onto the school as part of our gym?
I don't think any of the private clubs that use it want the restrictions of having it on school property.
Well, I'm saying,
Yeah.
these are things, are good questions, and I think that's what you have to ask the schools. Like North Franklin has their own rink.
Well, yeah,
And we
Salmon,
Silver Lake has their
Salmon
own.
River, Ogdensburg.
They all do.
Yeah,
Yeah, the rink
So
is
how do they do that?
Then we
That's a good
lose
question.
field.
That's what we need to know.
Then we don't have a field to play on for the rest of our sports.
Oh, you know what, there's places up there that you can, the thing is, we have to look at it. You know, maybe there isn't room, but we need to look at the option, right? Why not? If we're gonna really look at this from all angles, let's look at the possibilities, so we don't cut ourselves
We should have
short.
a rink business.
I think we also pointed out last time that the ice surface is in very good condition, right? And the mechanics of it were in good
It's less than 15 years old, and it,
Smaller than it should be, smaller
it?
than it should be.
the rink, the ice?
Ice surface
The
is
floor.
small compared to most regular.
Talking about the floor?
Yeah, the floor.
Yeah, it's not very old.
It's not old and the equipment is fairly new.
Yeah.
It's the same vintage, but I think, I mean, the point, it is gonna be looked at. You know, regardless with this building, I think it's not gonna maybe change how we plan and talk about the arena and the scope of the project. It just changes how you deliver it, you know, and the funding and where the money comes from, so. I think we should, for this, just focus on the, you know, the program. But I think it's worth looking into and studying, so.
Yeah.
So I have a question, and I apologize because I couldn't make the last meeting. So these telescoping bleachers,
Mhm.
it's important to have telescoping bleachers in this rink. Why?
Well, it was just discussed, early on when we started scoping, that it would be advantageous to be able to close them against the wall and have that space in between the boards and the exterior wall for, other types of events that may come into the arena that may not require the fields, but wanna use that space.
So like birthday parties, things like that.
We have people that,
More seating.
we have people that run in the summer that set up tables in areas and they put stuff up for display and stuff like that. So it'd give us a bigger area. I think we were thinking on 20 feet there, weren't we?
There's quite a bit there, there's about 20 feet if we close the bleachers.
That you could push that bleacher up out of the way and have that open.
It'll more than double the seating.
Oh, the bleachers will more than double the seating inside the
And
ring.
that's always been an
Plus
issue.
these bleachers will double the seating too. These bleachers will double the seating.
The seating's gonna be more than double.
That's why I was curious. I mean, I knew they had an important role in that there were
Mhm.
other reasons. I just wanted to know. Thank you.
I know that what, you know, outside, you know, has nothing to do with the renovation in itself, but I think, you know, Chris, in terms of his question, like, how do we ensure that this happens or that happens, you know, as you look to other facilities in the area, it's very cut and dry. This is when ice is coming on, this is when turf is coming on, this is when ice is coming off, this is when turf is coming on. And there seems to be a set schedule, and in the town for decades, there was a set schedule, like, this is when ice is coming on, and this is when it's coming off. Since my involvement in figure skating, it kind of goes like this and goes like that, and it's had to for some years because state tournaments used to be hosted at a rink, and that no longer really happens in terms of hockey, is my understanding. That one thing now goes to a central location. But I think one thing that would happen that would benefit hockey, that would benefit any organization using the turf, that would benefit varsity, that would benefit figure skating as well, is having an understanding is this is when ice comes on, this is when ice comes off. And, you know, having some sort of set schedule. So we know in Clayton that ice is coming on this week and ice is coming off that week, and it's been that way for years at that facility. In Watertown, ice is getting put on this week, and you can anticipate it years ahead of time. This is just when it comes on and this is when it comes off. And it helps everyone in terms of being able to plan. And the other thing we found is that when our ice has been on, because Clayton takes theirs off relatively early to prepare for some of the shows that they're having. In the few years that we have ice 2 weeks later than them, when we move into that third week of March or that fourth weekend in March, that those last 2 weeks you find us completely booked at this rink. If you looked at like the end of last year's schedule, like no, you couldn't get ice. Like there was people actually leaving school early to get, like checking their kids out of school early to prepare for both hockey events and figure skating events and renting private ice. But I think if we were able to offset that with the TI rink, then you can, you know, because hockey and figure skating, they're long seasons. But if you're able to offset that, like, okay, so Clayton puts ice on, it's some week in October, if we could pull later than that, not earlier than that, but if we can pull later than that, and then we pull later than that where we sort of wave after when Clayton pulls ice, but, you know, we're not talking about April, I swear to God, because I would stick a pen in my eye.
Me too.
But, you know, but if we could have some sort of set schedule, like November 1st, you know, this is when it starts, and the third week in March, this is when it's taken off. And, okay, it takes a week to turn around, so we have, you know, turf every year, April 1st, and we have it April 1st. I think that is something that would benefit every organization that has a vested interest in this.
I think something we tried to do this year, and I talked with Matt a lot about this, and I think Matt was in contact with the school, is that there's a date that the school can start their winter sports practices. Am I right?
Spring sports.
And then there's that date. And that was the date that we shot for to open to have ice ready for the school to use, because two of our large customers are school boys and school girls, let alone the youth stuff. So that's what we did in November, okay? And I'm not sure where we're at for next year. I think we're thinking the same. But this turf thing is a whole new world to us.
Well, this is only a year.
And we're learning, and we're still learning. So just we're asked to bear with us. And one thing I had with Dennis is I made sure that Dennis put on our calendar, I'm going to say hopefully a month before it happened, that on March, whatever that date was, 3rd or 4th, that was the end of the ice. Because we had a really strict timeline to get the turf in 4 or 5 days, so.
No, and I appreciate it, because we couldn't have done what we needed to do, you know, at your original date. We wouldn't have been able to put a show on, because it was over February break.
Yeah.
And we couldn't have gotten it done.
Yeah.
Because our attendance tends to be lighter over breaks, and we could have never gotten a show on. So the organization as a whole appreciates you extending up those, that extra week, because we wouldn't have been able to do it.
Yeah. And any of your concerns or any of that stuff, feel free to talk to.
But I think as an organization, you know, if you get some different organizations, if we could come up with something, and eventually your ICE organizations might be on the losing end. They you know, over time, they may lose out, and it no longer may be feasible. But I think, you know, going forward with the intention of us still having ICE for a period of time, just having a set schedule will just allow for some planning. With not having blinders on, that there may not always be ice there.
Yep, I agree.
There's also going to need to be planning for the construction process itself, because let's face it, probably both seasons will be impacted by the construction, just as the gym is now with the school sports. So that's something that we're going to need to coordinate very closely with.
I think every organization who has a vested interest completely understands that and is, you know, more than understanding of that.
or there isn't enough ice, you know, if we don't plan that early, there might be organizations that never get the opportunity in those seasons, and so we'll have to look far ahead when we are planning the project.
Yeah, and my daughters are users of the turf. Since the turf has been on, they've been there once, twice a week as softball players, as soccer players, and they are most certainly using that facility in all of my children in that capacity as well.
I think when we look about the project as a whole, we have to, I think most of us here are really excited about the project, right? But there are other community members who maybe aren't looking at using it as much, who maybe won't be as excited about it. So trying to balance, obviously with grants, and we have some really good prospects there for offsetting this, but making the rink what we want, what we need, what we anticipate for the future, not putting lipstick on a pig, just to say it once more, you know, but also balancing that with what members of the community might not be using it and still get their support for the project. The more families that use that rink, the more people know that we're a community that supports children and families, the more people we have maybe choose to live here instead of living other places. The more kids we get at our school, the more state aids we get, and the more building units we get, because we have a bigger population. You know, the more people we have using that rink, the more people we have downtown eating in our restaurants. So, you know, there's benefits to it, but I think weighing what we really want and need for that, and also pointing out the advantages to people who may not use it, and balancing those two things, not going so big that we don't get support from other community members, but also getting what we want out of it.
I think part of that is having someone, we talked about this, someone in place to, when and if the rink gets remodeled, to promote like our off times and everything. So not sitting idle and having to use, like the boom removers, for example. I'm sure they would love to come in there. You know, it's a padded surface. You can walk, I can run on it and not be sore. You know, it's a unique place to do about anything. So having, like Emily said, having, you know, the older population, you're welcome to come use it during the day. So for the most part, you know, with the exception of the school, it would probably sit idle for a better part of the day. So it's the same thing with the ice, and I'm sure Craig knows some of the older guys will go up there and skate during the day. And it's just something that we should promote as much as possible.
You know, what's really happening a lot is this indoor pickleball.
Yeah.
They're doing it for church on carpet.
Yep.
I don't know how heavy the carpet is, whether it would work there, but you can set across.
You do.
Well, that's something you could put on the turf too, so they can play.
Well, they just do the, well, I don't know if the turf, is it really hard, like, I mean, is it like this kind of carpet, is it softer?
It's pretty soft.
So it wouldn't bounce right
No.
now? Okay, it wouldn't happen.
Yeah, pickleball is getting to be a big sport. Yeah.
Any other ideas or stuff that you can think of, Andrew, or that we have from the public to write down?
I just wanna talk about the concessions a little bit, and what, if anybody has experience with concessions, what do we really need there? And if, probably the best thing to do would be to look at other facilities, maybe around us, that have ample concessions and facilities as a model to look at. Typically that's, you know, where I like to start, you know, what do we wanna be, and then how do we get there, so.
Yeah, my wife for several years did the concession down there for minor hockey, and, we did great with it. And it's a big moneymaker for, I mean, minor hockey or the town or whatever.
What type of cooking devices and products, and I think we're talking a little bit about what do we need in a kitchen and.
What are we gonna serve? What do we wanna serve out of the concessions?
Basic stuff.
You know, I mean, we did pretty good with what we did. We did when my wife did it, we brought in our own, electric grill and things, but it would be nice to have a fryer. So we, you know, 'cause French fries in a hockey rink or, you know, concession is huge.
Big money in those.
and, maybe a flat top, you know, grill for doing burgers, but you'd have to have the hood, the Ansel system, the whole 9 yards, you know, but you can make good money off in the concession. And you could do it either, you know, you lease it out to someone, or you could do it, the organization do it, get the health department license, or, you know, there's a lot of different ways you can do it, and it's a good moneymaker. Cause I've actually thought about doing it myself, you know, getting a license and opening it up, you know, the last couple of years, but with, you know, the way the scheduling has been and stuff, you know, I was leery of it because, you know.
But I think you'd definitely be looking at something different, like the flat top, you'd be looking at like 2 fryers, enough space to have like, you'd have like 2 fridges, one could be a freezer only, one could be a fridge. You'd need some sort of vent system, you'd need a large countertop, whether it's on the side or through the middle to hold stuff. You might be able to do a draft beer system, and then you would want, you know, some additional countertop space to have some of you're gonna want, you know, coffee like coffee machines, and then you need like every single one has like a cappuccino type machine, so you would need some counter space to hold those various items. You'd want 2 microwaves, whether they were in a system where they were on top of each other or side by side. It would be easier to have them on top of each other somewhere, because it would be taking up less space if they sort of went that way. But something like that, can you have the opportunity to visit, you know, any local rinks to get some ideas? Like, I know you're not a restaurant owner, but, you know, in terms of what you can, as a person who has more knowledge as a designer and an architect, in order to see, like, oh, they look at the TI rink, or they look at the rink in Ogdensburg, this is what these concessions look like, I can see this is really useful and this not as useful, and we could sort of blend these couple of really positive things together.
Yeah, and that's really what, if they're public facilities, then we can ask to see them and get in and look, and that's why I asked about like the model type facility, because those are the ones you wanna go and look at. Same thing with locker rooms, anything, if there are model facilities that we should be looking at, you know, as a role model facility, we can certainly ask to go see those.
Yeah, 'cause it definitely has to be a bigger concession there at the rink down here, because there's just not enough room to do what should be done. I mean, 'cause it could be a good money maker, and you can do it like they do in Watertown, where you lease it out to someone to run the concession, and as long as that person, you know, is leasing it, gets a schedule of what events are going on, you know, 'cause that's what we were running into the last year that my wife was running the schedule. We never got a good schedule. We never knew what was going on. She'd get a call at last minute, well, we've got a tournament going on, nobody's here for the concession, you know, so we done more than anybody in the organization, you know, and they were supposed to be doing so many hours per year or whatever, and it was just us running it, you know, all the time.
George, out of all the facilities, what locker room, like, you've been in many more than I have, but out of all the facilities, what locker room are you like, oh, makes a lot of sense, this is comfortable for the kids?
Chill. Yeah.
I've never been to
What'd you say, Matt?
Playing, like.
Shield Arena.
Shield Arena.
So, if we get out there, where would be your second?
I mean, no holds barred, like Watertown has decent sized rooms. Obviously the pro room is an ideal setup.
that does have the amenities built in it, the shower, toiletries, stuff like that, yeah, skate sharpeners, stuff like that, that's all available there.
Yeah,
That would be my
we did
ideal setup,
have
you know, everybody's got their own locker with storage underneath it, so once you're done with your stuff, you can stow it away, instead of it just sitting in the middle of the floor. But the big benches where everybody sits, you know, like in Clayton, it's not far off, right? They're almost there, in my opinion. You can have that seating area, but more personalized storage with it. It kind of gives you your area instead of, you know, just pitching it on the floor like you're at home kind of deal. A little more organization there, I think they personally would have nailed it.
Maybe
I've been in
thoughts
some.
on how class guys agree, their locker rooms are. I know they're kind of tight, but they have quite a few of them in there in that one.
They're very tight.
Yeah.
Tight, but I mean, it's still, you could kind of have the same idea, just have them be a little bigger, but they're all kind of in that one little L shape. And isn't there like, six of them in there, I think?
Yeah, somewhere around that neighborhood. I mean, really,
Yeah.
nobody's got the collapsible bags anymore. Everybody's bringing towers to wheel things, so you can't really stow them away. But I mean, like the gear hanging up, stuff like that, your coats, whatever. Those are just the, you know, the amenities. As far as like locker rooms go, you could really throw a wrench in there and dress it up however you want. It really depends on, my opinion, where you want to go with this. Do you want to cater to youth associations, or do you want to be able to have adult leagues, things like that, you know, like, that's kind of where you gotta go. Do you want to feature more towards the adults and the ability to go there, or do you just want to maintain, a child atmosphere, if you will?
Kind of a balance
Yeah,
type thing.
it's really,
Middle of the road.
a little bit of both.
Yeah.
It's hard to design a locker room for a child, for a child and an adult. They're two different animals.
Right.
I mean, when it comes time for kids, they're not necessarily gonna need to shower every time.
Mm-hmm.
But a pro player goes in there for whatever sport, they're gonna wanna shower, right? So again, you have to build that locker room for both amenities.
So would it make sense to have two that were a little higher end and two that were a little lower, more kid-oriented? Not saying that the kids wouldn't necessarily use those, but you have something close, probably not as close to the pro room in Watertown, but you have something like that where you have individual space, because even when you're talking about 14, 15, 16-year-old kids,
You get the older kids, and
you know,
they,
you would have
some of
that,
them
and
wanna shower
then
after,
when you start to
some
talk
don't.
about, you know, tournaments, and you're talking about minor hockey and stuff like that, or even when you're talking about figure skating, all of that's not necessary. So if you had, you know, 2 and 2, so you had these 2 higher end ones and these 2 that were a little more not as high end, not as individualized, maybe there's not a shower in there, but there's a bathroom in there or something like that, maybe that might make sense?
I completely agree with that.
Yep.
I mean,
I like the bathroom.
especially when you're talking, you want the
accessible to
varsity room in there, you know, the varsity room, you're gonna wanna make that the, you know, the night of the round table kind of thing, and that's gonna be the high-end market over there, you know.
But there would be the idea that there's 2 of them.
But then there'd be the other side, right? And I would completely agree with that, making 2 different opposing ends, you know,
Yep.
obviously you're gonna have a home and
Technically,
away
only
team.
2 teams would need a shower to begin with, so you don't need 4 locker rooms because we don't have 2 sets, 2 sheets of ice.
Right.
So you don't need 4 showers.
No, they usually come
So
in like
the
a big,
2 main locker rooms would
shower
be
stall with, like,
technically
10
the
heads in
varsity
it, you know, or
locker
something
rooms
like
would have
that,
a shower system. And the other ones would have, and the shower system wouldn't necessarily have to have where the bathroom would be, or even the toilet, but ideally you'd have a toilet there too, I guess, but no matter where the bathrooms are, the public can access the bathroom, and you don't, because 4 teams aren't gonna shower at the same time, just whoever played that game. Their own separate locker rooms, they'd be the varsity locker rooms, and the other locker rooms are temporary, where everybody, the transition locker rooms, where teams are getting ready to go out on the ice, or the skaters or whatever, getting ready to go out on the ice, they don't need a shower. And then they can always go in the other and take a shower.
What do you think?
I think you do need 4 rooms connected with 2 showers. Because if you have a varsity hockey tournament here, you got two guys playing, they could get off the ice, but other guys are stuck in lockers with no showers, what are they gonna do?
Yeah, you could have
You
the locker
gotta
rooms
have
that
two,
The locker
connect,
room that
you
accepts
know,
it,
kinda
yeah.
like
you gotta have two showers
They
connected with maybe
bathrooms.
two locker rooms, and then another a duplicate of that. I think you gotta have that for 4 teams coming in, so they can keep coming in and out all the time.
Right, and I've seen that before in other rinks that, you know, we've been in, where you have a locker room here, and you have a shower in between. So, you know, you could, one shower would, you know, be sufficient for both rooms.
Yep.
So you could have 2 showers and, you know, for four locker rooms.
Any other questions or any other
And
input?
you said something about, or I know one of the concerns was the downtime when they're doing the project. Based on the additions and stuff on that, is there parts of this project could be done while the facility operates?
I thought about that. Because of the firewall between the addition and the arena, you could phase the project, so you renovate the arena first and get it operational. You could even get a C of O for that space while you're still working on the addition. So you can phase this to try to get the rink itself open sooner. Now, it's not gonna be much use per se, because you're not gonna have your locker rooms. You'd have the 2 at the end. You might have access to the ones inside the arena, but you're gonna not have the addition yet, so. It's something that we'd have to discuss if it makes sense. I think the project it would add a little bit of complexity and cost to the project, because you focus on one thing, then you focus on the other. If you give a contractor the entire project in a schedule to complete all of it,
More efficient.
it's gonna be more cost effective and efficient, so. That's just something we'll have to discuss.
One other question is, could we get possibly some volunteers to help to drop the cost down and have people help, you know, do the project, to work with the contractor, whatever, to, you know, something like that, like we've done in the past with the old, heating room and things like that?
It's difficult when you get into bid public work.
I know that.
When you do a little project and it's all volunteer, it's not an issue. When you start to mix, it mostly has to do with liability.
Right.
Especially for the town and for the contractor on behalf of the volunteers. I don't wanna say it's impossible, but it's probably unlikely. You know, it probably makes the most sense to roll everything in and let a contractor finish it. And that's gonna be the fastest way for, you know, from A to B. But that's a good point. One other thing that I think is important to look at in every public facility is security systems. So your locking, your camera systems. It's good to have a good security system in place. You know, like with the schools with the key fob systems, they're really nice because you can control access. Getting away from keyed locks and going with electronic locks. That way coaches, obviously town employees, but certain coaches could have essentially a key fob to the building that can be turned on and off, you know, at the end of the season or when there's coaching changes. I think that having something like that helps because you can keep the building locked more often when it's not necessary to be.
And you know who's going in and out.
Open all the time. You know, right now the way it is, you open it at the beginning of the day and you close it and lock it at the end of the day. We could have an electronic system set up that sort of locks itself. You know, it just opens and locks based on the schedule. I think it would save the town a lot of, you know, time and headache of.
Is that what the school has?
It'd be very similar to a school system. You know, for public events, they have to unlock the doors, like for the auditorium. It functioned probably very similar to something like that. So when you have a game and the public's coming through, you'd funnel them still to the front door. You only want your main entrance to be unlocked. But there's gonna be probably a series of exits and entries at other points around the building. You know, it's okay if the coach comes in one of those doors, but you still want the rest of the public coming through your main doors. So it's important, I think, in a project of this size to improve that aspect of the facility. It makes it safer, it makes it easier to use. for all the occupants. And I would, we'd really model that after a school system, so.
Okay, I think he's got a,
That would have to include some upgrades to like the internet and the ethernet that currently exists there as well as part of the scope of the project.
Yeah, we're looking at all of the infrastructure in that building. Electrically, we know that the service coming in is okay, there's a lot inside that we're gonna have to pull out and replace. Wi-Fi is certainly something, we haven't looked at that, but we will look at what's there and what we can do to increase the availability of that. For the, mostly the public, there's probably a little bit of a town need, but it's mostly public use.
Thank you so much.
appreciate everybody's time on a Wednesday in March. Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Until next time, thank you.
Yep.
No, I did not. I came from,
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everything okay? Everything's wonderful. Yeah, no problems at all.
Just came in a bunch of boxes and.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And I know like you see advertisements all the time, US Steel, all these buildings. You just buy a bigger building that was already
pre-engineered building. Well,
I looked at it myself personally.
Yeah, I mean, that size and that type of rigid frame, we could quickly come up with a budget to replace it.
I gotta believe it would have to be cheap, it would have to be cheaper at the end of the day, because right now, the building at one time had a sewage line, especially across the back.
It's all hodgepodge.
Yeah.
Especially the walls.
Time to put the lockers in, you're gonna have to have doors in there. Trying to cut a hole through that cinder block, the whole thing's just gonna come down.
Yeah, we would, there is a hodgepodge of walls.
So this would avoid that. I just think there would be so much inherent cost in just working around these fixes that made sense at the time, but at this point in time.
Well, you could, I know the town, at least preliminarily talked about creating a full year-round turf facility.
I think that's the way we're eventually gonna go.
A full what? A full year-round turf building. One option is if we're talking big scope here, obviously, you can take that building down and build it with a higher, taller building like you're talking. You could re-erect that steel frame is still fine.
Oh, just put it
somewhere else on a new foundation.
That's a good point, that's a real good point.
Because he built existing steel, because the steel is all fine, it's all the stuff that's been added to the steel.
Right, it's just a bigger record set, just a bunch of nuts and bolts.
And so you could re-engineer just a foundation and set that back up, and that could just be a town building as well.
So I just had a quick question on this, so I see the 22 feet here with locker beds. Did we say we needed a 4-foot wide hallway?
Probably be 5, closer to 5, just so that you can pass one through like 6 feet.
So if we take that off from there, that's outside dimensions. So we're also losing the 8-inch wall and the 10-inch block wall, plus the seat. So those are gonna be very narrow. The block rooms are gonna be narrow. They're gonna be long, but they're gonna.
Essentially, to me, it sounds like you're taking the seating arrangement that we have now and going right to left with it. You know what I mean? By the time you get done adding all the other requirements that go with it, that was one of my concerns.
For the locker rooms, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be like a rectangle.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if there was a
long, narrow room.
To me, it would be like the same dimensions as what you have now, Matt. You take that and then over here.
The new ones, they'll be bigger, wider than the existing ones. The ones now are extremely narrow. Those are probably only
Where's the property line in relation?
9 feet.
Where's the property line in relation?
So when we pulled off from that Connex box, we found a stake like right here. Yeah. And then we found, Brian showed us that stake that was at his house, which would have probably been right here someplace.
His house is right here, so it'd be on this corner there. I think, Brian.
He's like right in the middle.
Okay.
He's on the middle, straight back.
Yeah, well, like here's our Connex box, right down the street there. So,
20 is a safe guesstimate right now, of what we can go back. Once we get a survey, we'll know for sure.
20 is the estimate.
It's a safe.
It's a safe estimate.
It's sort of a safe.
well, the only other thing
Yeah,
is, there's a drain right there in the middle of that building, remember? So that,
So we got those two boxes there, those boxes are 102 inches wide each by law, they gotta be 8 foot 6 inches.
Yeah, they got 8 to
And they got a foot between them, and they got a foot or two off the wall.
and we still have plenty of room to move that over though.
And you got those,
When we looked at that, that line goes like this.
It's angled.
It doesn't go,
Yeah, it pinches here at the front corner.
Which corner?
I think it pinches here.
It gets narrower there?
Based on the tax map.
Doesn't run parallel to
It
this.
doesn't run parallel.
no, not at all. I thought,
You can step the parallel.
No, it doesn't run parallel.
What the building is?
I had a
The building
map.
is parallel, but it doesn't run parallel.
How come this is choked down right here as well?
It doesn't have to be. It's just if it's a warming room, if it doesn't have seating behind and it's a warming room, you don't really take advantage of depth, you know, because it's just really standing room only. It very well could come straight across. We just have to think about what's that space used for, you know? You can do
Unless we
bleachers
put in
in there.
one chair in the back so people could stand in the back and you have more people in the warming room.
Same concept as the seating, right?
If you're 20 feet wide there, you just need to utilize it either with tiering it so you can see over one another, or it could just be more an extension of the warming room with tables and chairs, you know, a place to sit down.
and the other thing, Brett and I talked about this in our indoor, soccer, to get leagues to come in here, to get people from out of the area to actually play sanctioned games. Those nets have to be recessed. So if you go to the YMCA, there's no, you can't go behind the net in indoor soccer. It has to be, that's the end line.
So we need to change the boards there so they can open up more.
Or remove whatever 2 or 3 boards to make whatever that goal size.
Make that section removable for those, so when we put the turf down.
That would allow us to have sanctioned games.
This afternoon, I'm gonna call Jimmy Jones,
I think in this concept, we're actually taking boards down and making it go back. It's part of
I called it a track.
You can take what was put in there is really not that permanent.
Bolt them and take them out.
It was done very fast.
Size opening
It's not with building.
6 foot in.
So this warming room actually goes outside the building with glass in the.
Then you gotta store them and move them.
The other thing,
You'll be able to walk right through there during.
the other thing to remember
They do it every
it's not an actual goal. So all it is a rectangle cutout with it has like a backdrop on it, like a fabric of some sort.
So Jim Jones from Clayton told me to take those boards out of there, no problem.
Okay, it may require a new board to get your right size or whatever. But, you know, that would just be replaced. You take the padding off. It's not an actual goal like you make in it's just the backdrop there.
So it's just a dampen.
Yeah, well, you can kick the ball as hard as you want there, just watch that mat and it drops.
So people using the facility notice the difference in temperature?
Oh, I was there last night, and it was 60 degrees in there.
I think
kids were taking their sweatshirts off.
I think I was there like.
That's a good temperature.
Oh, it's,
You don't want
right
to
now
put
it's
warmer
perfect.
on it.
That's a good
I was
temperature.
there just last Wednesday, I think I was in there. And they said they just turned it on or whatever, and he's like, it's supposed to be 10 degrees like every day that it was on. He's like, it doesn't feel like it, but by the time I left, I was like, it feels like.
especially when you go on the surface. Not so much outside of there, but it does feel a little bit in there.
It's beautiful. You're running around, stuff like that.
It was very comfortable.
Good.
It's working. Not sure what the light bill is gonna be, but.
They're taking a meter reading every day.
Yeah.
And that's Ronnie's responsibility, because Ronnie knows this freaking electric world like
For the
unbelievable.
demand meter.
Tells us what to do.
Those numbers look like 4 lights to me.
That's a big thing with him.
Yeah.
That is demand.
Well, he can have that.
Oh, no.
Right now,
We don't
it's like
that.
6.83.3
Kilowatt.
We're at a meeting for the rig renovation. Can I call you?
I'm not sure what's going on.
All right, 10 minutes, when I hit your truck.
I think that'll.
It doesn't look like going down to the spin out, who knows?
he wants to strike the field.
Guess I can turn that off.
Yeah.
Mention that, I was gonna talk to you about that, like.
Well, I think the biggest thing I heard was no lipstick on the pig.
That's right, my line, and it's staying.
Where'd you hear that one?
I don't know, Simpsons probably.
One of my favorite ones. That's what I used to do to most of my flip houses, put lipstick on the pig.
Yeah.
It'll look like a different arena.
Oh, yeah.
Sure it will.
Kinda like that Pennington house we looked at.
Yeah, I ran from that one.
Like, tell that guy not to call me.
Yeah, don't call me.
Lining the turf field. I talked to Brad about it. Chris said we could use their strike